I really like how the resource is designed to work on two levels, leadership and teaching. So let's look at these two levels by looking at two of the scenario cards, a teacher scenario and a leadership scenario. So for this activity, we're delighted to welcome some teachers to join us to share their thoughts. We're going to look at the teacher scenario first. So here goes. Michael teaches a year 9, that's 13 to 14-year-old maths class, with a wide range of prior attainment. A few months ago, he became concerned that regardless of his pupils' prior attainment in maths, few were able to explain their reasoning when solving multi-stage problems, even when they displayed the ability to solve the mathematical problems. Most of his pupils lacked the metacognitive awareness of their own thought processes. So this is over to you, teachers, please. Have you come across a similar lack of metacognitive awareness amongst your pupils? How do you find this limits them?
So can I just very briefly, can I just introduce these three teachers who kindly agreed to join us? So we have Jonathan Coward, Adam Torrens, and Mike Galligan. Over to you.
Thank you. I don't mind starting us off, if that's okay. So thank you for that. So I'm John from here in Barcelona. After reflecting upon the year 9 scenario, I was actually in front of me, I've got all the cards spread out, and actually went through the card process thinking about this year 9 student, year 9 student who's struggling with reasoning, possibly having a lack of awareness of metacognition. So I just want to spend just 1 minute sharing with you the cards that I chose as part of that thinking. So starting with your concept cards. So I've got them actually in front of me here. So starting with picked on 3. So oracy, thinking about speaking and listening effectively. So thinking about them being able to express themselves. The concept of metacognition. So the students being aware of their understanding of what that means. And then interestingly, I picked on the other one, which is monitoring. So paying attention to their thoughts. So whilst they're explaining and getting more familiar with metacognition, I thought that card is really, really useful about not just explaining it, but being aware how they're explaining it. I'll then just pick on one more card from each of the teacher action cards and then the pupil action cards around this case study. Once again, the process behind it took me about 15 or 20 minutes just picking and choosing the cards. So for this specific year 9 student, the teacher action card is facilitating dialogue. So it's kind of talking about how they're learning. So developing a range of methods to stimulate and deepen classroom dialogue. So it's getting them thinking, getting them speaking. And then for the teacher, how they support these children, possibly if they're just beginning on their journey to explain metacognition. I thought this card was lovely. So the idea of the student scaffolding. So providing pupils with support that they need to explain about their learning. And then just one pupil card I'll pick on. Really like this one. This one, the idea of the student's actions card, which is making links. So it's not starting from the beginning for them, but it's when they come across new ideas, do they find it easy or difficult? It's kind of explaining their thinking from what they already know. So the reflection from that case study, the idea of going from concepts to then teachers to pupils, I just found really, really meaningful.
Fabulous. Thank you. Would anybody else like to respond to that? Or let me give you another prompt.
Hello, everyone. Mike Galligan here. Thanks, Karen and Greg, for setting that up. That's very interesting. These are areas I think about a lot too as a teacher. If I could just answer just your question, how does kind of the lack of metacognitive skills limit students sometimes? From my experience, I can think of a couple of examples. The course I teach is a business management course, so oftentimes I'll see when they get to the more difficult concepts in the course, like contribution costing or critical path analysis or something like that, if they don't have these skills, they have a hard time kind of planning out how to proceed with kind of piecing together their understanding of those concepts. So I think that's one way that they can be limited. And then also, I think it also limits their ability to apply what they've learned in other subjects, interdisciplinary. So They just, because they don't have the kind of the roots for, how to think about how they learn that concept, it kind of limits their ability to do that.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Powerful. And I think it resonates with so many of us. We'll take another question. What methods and strategies are you aware of for giving pupils greater autonomy over their learning?
So for me, in this particular scenario, being elementary teacher and in particular ed tech, this is a very real scenario in my life, but it's more my personal life that reflects back on my professional life. So my wife is Singaporean, and Singapore is famous for their Singapore math program. So when we go out and when we used to date, we used to play darts. And obviously with darts, you start at 501 is one particular game, and then when you hit a number, you have to go down, subtract that off your total. And my wife with Singaporean maths, she gets it like that. And I need the time to process it, being from more of an inquiry-based school, and going, well, wait a second, I need to make sure that we're correct here. And she's ready to move on. And a couple of times when those happens, we reflect on this, both being elementary teachers, and how the positives and the negatives of having that style of thinking, and how we have strategies in place for our students to make sure our students are getting the best of both worlds, or having dedicated time to think about what's more appropriate in that situation. So as an ed tech person in the elementary school, what we tend to do is having a strategy where we want the students to have that thinking time in class to build out what this means for them and reflect on it in the real world scenario. So it doesn't become a math problem in this scenario. It becomes a real world problem, as when would this apply to you? And what I tend to teach our students is having that time to sit by and building your own resource bank. Because as you know, with schools, if you're learning about probability, then the probability math poster goes on the wall. When you move into measurement, that poster comes off the wall. The kids don't see it again until the next year's teacher revisits probability. So it's taking that time in your lessons to get the students to reflect and think about, what does this mean for me moving forward? And how can I build my own resources that are accessible and fun and personal to my own learning, so I can recall those in another time where I need them, but I might not have them internally?
Brilliant. Thank you. And I think one question for everybody is, having engaged in this activity, what might you do differently in your own practice? Anybody want to?
I mean, I could pipe in here, kind of going back to my business management example. I tend to do okay at this already, and that is kind of looking for those kind of natural moments while you're teaching to kind of pause for a few minutes and get the students to kind of just like not look at the content and think about how they're approaching the content and how they're preparing for certain things, and referring back to all the preparation they've done before and bringing that all together. So kind of thinking about how they plan out and are more deliberately aware of what works for them best, basically, and really acknowledging that and grabbing a hold of that, because that'll work for them. So I think doing more of that, certainly, I think going ahead, based on what we've talked about so far here today, is a key takeaway for me.
Brilliant. Thank you. Anybody else want to add before we move on to the leadership scenario?
Just to add on very, very briefly, it does also make me think about where reflection happens within the school. So it makes me think about where the time is that the teachers dedicate it in the classroom to reflection, especially what Adam was saying, the idea of them having the area of learning, making it personal to them, to reflect on it and think about, well, what does that mean to me now? What does that mean to me in the future? Making time for that. Then it even makes me think of kind of where is that within the school day outside of the classroom? So potentially somewhere like the assemblies, for example, they have within the schools. Where is that modeling then kind of happening there, and that almost thinking out loud happening across the whole community?
Brilliant. Thank you. Just raises so many tensions with a curriculum, and then finally the opportunity to really develop thinking. Thank you. So we move on to the leadership scenario. 2 teachers are part of a team of middle leaders in a school which has committed to introducing Activate. They think it's a great resource and have been using it with colleagues in their departments. Other colleagues have experienced resistance when introducing in their teams. A couple of middle leaders in the team say that they have more pressing priorities. So I guess the first question is, have you come across similar issues in your own practice? There's lots of smiling going on there. Who wants to have a go at that?
So one thing that comes to mind with me is this happens daily, multiple times a day, and sometimes when you're working on something, it feels like it's the most important thing, and then the next thing is the most important thing, and everyone feels that way. And then we look at things at different times. So just having the in this scenario is getting the right people the same amount of time and getting people in a room to discuss something and to talk about the priorities and to have that time again to look at other things that are happening and to make a call to say, where does this fit? The great thing about something like Activate is that it's taking that time away from more administrative tasks that teachers and leaders do get bogged in and we do have daily issues with. Sometimes we feel like we have to do something because the end of the day is approaching and it will go onto the agenda tomorrow if we're not careful. What Activate does is it allows you to sit back and think, why are we doing all this for? Like, what's the purpose for our students when they leave our school or when they graduate from our school? Why are we in education? This should benefit them for the future. And to sit back and say to our leaders and middle leaders, to say, why are we in education? Is it these small tasks that we need to tick off, or is it something larger that we need to take the time every now and then to revisit and build some strategies around?
Thank you. Would anybody else like to yeah.
Just to build on to what Adam said, particularly around the right people. So a very short story. I was in a school in Spain last week, and I talked to the SLT about this amazing resource. Now they've got their school improvement plan, their SIP, and in it it's actually got self-regulation. That's an element. So I thought that they'd be really excited by it. They weren't. So on reflection, they didn't have capacity to fully understand what the resource could kind of give them. Later on, I met with, actually over a coffee, their SENCO. They call it an inclusion lead, but the SENCO lead. Interestingly, she studied psychology at university. As soon as I talked to her about metacognition, she was teaching me, not me teaching her. It was lovely. When she found out about this resource, she talked about her year 9s. So then she was looking eagerly for this resource to land on a doorstep to then use with a group of children she know it could work with. So again, this overlaps what Adam was saying about the idea of finding the right people within the school. And almost it makes me think that school that I'm going to go back to in March, it'd be interesting to see what story they've created with this resource and then how they can then build within their school.
Well, it's a fabulous example. I'm just going to move on to another question. In this scenario, how might you extend engagement? Well, I think you've answered that one. How might the leadership learning cards be used to explore ways forward?
I think with leaders, like I mentioned before, with many initiatives and many ideas being presented to the leadership team, and it being almost impossible, especially in a large school, for a leader to fully understand the situation that the person requesting a new plan or a new project, fully understanding what the needs are. It's a good point for a leader to sit back and reflect and say, well, what are some strategies that we can have as a school so we are not in a reaction-based system based on request after request? How can we sit down and have some strategies to make sure that we are dealing with the right things at the right time and the most important things at the right time as well?
Absolutely critical leadership skill, prioritize. Andy?
Yeah, hi, Nahida. I can't help myself but to jump in here, and thanks for James or whoever put it back to this particular leadership learning card, familiarize. I mean, it's sort of right there on the one of the dialogue points, which is how is Activate fitting in with your school's vision, right? And we heard John share that you know, some of the schools in Spain had it in there, but they didn't necessarily unpack or clock that Activate could help, right? And so the notion would be that as leaders go through these cards, this is what they're talking about, and that when they go through the scenario card, they're actually almost metacognitive in itself in the first place, saying what might we encounter, right? And how are we going to combat this? And yes, we've got the moral imperative to do this. We know it, that the research is secure and the evidence is quite strong, and the impact is quite strong on learning. So how do we convince people? How are we going to do this? The idea is that the school figures it out for themselves, right? And this is what I think is the brilliant thing, is that part of these cards take you through those conversations. So it kind of it's already in there, it's already baked in there. So I just wanted to add in. Thank you.
And through that process, you're building and embedding a commitment to really achieve, you know, the ultimate vision, which is the self-regulated learner.
Nahida, can I ask you how you have been going about it? Because you've done a lot of work in this area, and you're in primary.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Louise. So very much like secondary colleagues, it's about nurturing a shared understanding of what we believe self-regulated learning to be, and really ensuring that across the school that we're all committed to, you know, the vision of developing the self-regulated learner. And we understand, I mean, for us, it always comes back to equity. How, linking to our core purpose, how does anything we nurture in terms of where we want students to be help us to close and bridge these sort of equity gaps? And for us, self-regulated learning is key. So it's you know, making sure that self-regulated learning is understood by everybody, as what you said when you talked us through, start with the end in mind. So we understand for students to be successful, they need to be self-regulated learners, and then work with ensuring that the leadership are really clear and committed, so that there's modeling in the moment all the time. And then they're working and creating the conditions to ensure that staff have the space. Well, Rose spoke to that. You know, there's dedicated time for teachers to be able to engage in this kind of thinking, but also then working with them in a way that's very concrete. So the pupil action cards, you know, all of these resources can help you work with teachers in professional development in a really hands-on way for them to take back into the classroom and to then be sharing with their colleagues.